thousands of federal workers under the threat of layoffs, labor unions are now stepping in. Last Tuesday, the American Federation of Government Employees and the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees sued the Trump administration from doing these mass layoffs.
For an update on where that lawsuit stands and many more legal questions, we're bringing in our legal guru, Schonfeld. Zach, good morning to you. So we know the union's lawsuit focuses on a memo the White House Budget Office sent to agency leaders at the end of September, telling them get ready to fire lots of federal employees. What is sort of the legal authority Trump is claiming to be able to do that?
Well, good morning, Corey and Hillary. This lawsuit taking aim here saying that the Trump administration only has the legal authority here to either tell federal employees that they can be furloughed and that they won't work during the shutdown, or of course some employees are exempted and continue to work and then receive back pay after the fact. But this lawsuit says that the administration cannot take this additional step of just laying off and firing federal employees entirely. Now, at this point in court, we have not yet heard the Trump administration's response to this, so we have not heard them yet lay out their arguments. This lawsuit is just getting started, but the heat is certainly already turning up. This lawsuit was filed Tuesday night, right before the shutdown went into place, but over the weekend, these unions have now filed an emergency motion that seeks to temporarily put any of these reductions in force on hold. So the very next step here would be to hear from the Trump administration.
Zach, as you well know, it's the first Monday in October. That means the Supreme Court's getting ready for their new term, and they're dealing with some really high-profile cases. We've got tariffs. We have the federal firings, as you mentioned. There are a couple of LGBTQ rights cases. But let's start with the tariffs, because this is something that means a lot to the president. Take us through what's being challenged.
Absolutely. We are now just about a month away from these oral arguments at the Supreme Court. It's going to be one of the biggest cases of the term. This question of whether President Trump can invoke an emergency law that Congress passed back in the 1970s to justify both his Liberation Day tariffs that he's imposed on countries all over the globe by citing an emergency over trade deficits, and then also some specific tariffs that he's imposed on Canada, Mexico, and China by declaring an emergency over fentanyl. The Trump administration has really minced no words in describing the stakes of this battle to the justices. They have described this as the president's most significant economic initiative since in his second White House term. And so here we are now just a few weeks. And I should also note, so many of these cases at the Supreme Court involving the Trump administration have been these emergency cases that have just been preliminary rulings. But this tariffs case is on their normal docket. So when we get this ruling, it is really set to be the final word on whether Trump can invoke this emergency law.
Zach, they've got a host of issues, as Shirley mentioned, LGBTQ plus cases, particularly one out of Colorado related to conversion therapy. There's mail-in ballots in Illinois. There's money in politics. I'll let you pick, since it's a Monday, which of these cases interests you the most and why?
Well, I'll start with the one that's on my mind right now, and that is that conversion therapy case you mentioned, because that one is headed to arguments just this week. It'll be going to the Supreme Court this week. It's one of the first big arguments of the term, and it is this latest case out of Colorado concerning a law that prevents mental health counselors from engaging in what has been described as conversion therapy, this practice of trying to get youth who are gay or bisexual or lesbian to somehow change their sexuality. And this law has now come under a challenge by a group called the Alliance Defending Freedom, this conservative Christian legal powerhouse that argues that it violates counselors' First Amendment rights. This is really the latest in a series of cases that we've seen ADF support out of Colorado. If you think back to the cake baker case, there was then a few years ago a website designer case, and now here we are talking about counseling and conversion therapy.
And voter rights is once again on the agenda too. Can you fill us in on that, Zach?
That's right, Hillary. That'll be next week, so not too long here, a major case over the future of Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act and whether courts can order states to continue redrawing their congressional districts, based on race in order to fix violations of Section 2. There have been big questions with the Supreme Court's conservative majority of whether Section 2 is going to continue in the future. We've heard from several justices on the conservative majority signaling that at some point Section Section 2 needs to have an endpoint. And so this is a case that arises out of Louisiana. It's been a very messy battle over the state congressional map that began right after the 2020 census. Here we are now halfway to the next census, and it's still going. It's back at the Supreme Court for a major argument here that really stands to impact not only Louisiana, but all of these states across the country that have been forced to draw minority-majority districts.
All righty, Zach Schonfeld, thank you so much. We'll talk to you next hour because there's a lot to talk about. Yeah. And as always, you can find all of Zach's reporting on the Supreme Court and more at thehill.com. His newsletter, The Gavel, drops every Wednesday. And as I mentioned, Zach will be back at 8 to talk about some of these other cases.